Thank you very much, and let me just start by giving my personal thanks to the Society of Antiquaries for organising this marvellous conference again. It's always fantastic getting this oversight of some of the amazing work that's happening in Scotland. I'm going to be talking about the preliminary work we've undertaken at Dunyvaig Castle on the Isle of Islay. This is an iconic monument, not just only for the island, but also for the whole west coast. Owned by Lagavulin Distillery there. Obviously it's a scheduled monument, and it's located on the south coast of Islay in Lagavulin Bay. You can see there on the headland. Lagavulin Castle is the standing remains there are generally thought to be 16th century. But the history of it most likely goes back at least to the 14th, 13th century and potentially earlier. Visiting the site today, that's the Royal Commission plan in the middle there, published in 1982. And you can see that the key features of Dunyvaig are the sea gate, where the arch has collapsed sometime in the last century. It's the only one of these so-called galley castles in the west coast that has a sea gate of this type. The tower that was consolidated in the 1990s and is still standing. The eastern seawall, and you can see how it still has some facing there, but otherwise is gradually eroding. Somebody earlier mentioned about the threat to coastal sites from erosion. And there you can see part of the digital survey there, and you can see those 5 structures interior to the courtyard wall. So it's a particularly interesting monument because it hasn't had later 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century development on there. So potentially is accessible for excavation through to the medieval layers reasonably swiftly. The project is being undertaken by IALA Heritage. IALA Heritage is a Scottish charity that was established on the island in 2016 by a group of islanders and myself, which has a mission to protect and promote the archaeology on the island. It's got 4 key missions: to undertake research on the archaeology of the island, to engage in education, everything from working with primary schools to public talks and walks and so forth, education in a very broad sense, recreation, to try to enhance access to many of the monuments on the island, to improve access. As you can imagine, there's all sorts of land access issues there. And conservation, to protect these monuments for future generations. And IALA Heritage undertakes a wide range of activities involving guided walks, talks, done projects for schools, and IALA Heritage supports universities undertaking research, whether it's in Mesolithic or Neolithic or so forth. And what it's determined to do is to have its own flagship project called the Dunyvaig Project of the castle. That it's anticipating will be a project lasting at least a decade. Now we're right at the very start of that, and of course to get to a decade there's all sorts of hurdles that need crossing over, not least of all is raising funding for that time period. And the project is designed to have 4 key components to it. One is research, finding more about this hugely important monument, historically important, and finding more about its role and significance for the medieval periods. Secondly, using it as an archaeological field school for training university students, community volunteers, other interested parties. At the moment has been using training students from my own University of Reading, and those from the University of Highlands and Islands. A community project. This project and the mission of the IALA Heritage is really to engage with the local community, both residents on the island and visitors to there. It's generally trying to deliver archaeology for all, focused around this particular monument. And then conservation, to find means to improve access to this monument, at the same time protecting it, conserving it, and improving the information about it for residents and future people. I say we're right at the very start. It's designed as at least a 10-year project. Last year and forthcoming this summer, we're undertaking an assessment project. Then we hope to begin our Major excavations of 2020 with at least 4 major field seasons, and then after that, no doubt, there'll be 5-6 years of post-excavation publication. And throughout that period of research, we'll also be delivering a conservation and public access plan, and also a community engagement programme with a wide range of activities seeking to find new and innovative ways for people to engage with their cultural heritage, who may not want to be getting their hands dirty and their knees sore by getting involved in the excavation itself. I'm not going to run through these dates, but I just want to make the point that Dunyvaig is, of course, well noted in the histories of the medieval period, and it's speculated that this was, in fact, the naval base of Mallard, with the first kingdom yards in the 12th century. Then it became the naval base for the Lords of the Isles, the MacDonalds. And then during the next 100 years or so, right up to the in 17th century, it was essentially fought over, primarily by the MacDonalds and the Campbells and the various alleged clans. Now, what I do want to just you to know is just those little historical events at the end there, because they'll be relevant later in the talk with some of the archaeology. Both in 1614-15, when Sir John Campbell of Courtyard took control of Islay, and then the MacDonald's rebellion in 1646 when Courtyard, and they took possession of Dunyvaig again, and they were besieged in there for a year, and then they were eventually taken. They were surrendered, taken, and Courtyard supposedly was hung from the crags by the castle. Just remember those events because they'll be of relevance shortly. The bigger picture in the medieval period, I'm a prehistorian particularly, I like to look at big pictures, is that these centuries from the 11th to the 17th century was a medieval world of clans, warlords, lordships, kingdoms and so forth, all acting as either as agents or in rebellion against Norwegian, Scottish and English crowns. And Dunyvaig Castle there sits right in the middle of this large archipelago in the west there. And essentially what's happening is these clans, these warlords, are fighting, and it's about securing and maintaining their power bases. And if we're putting a research agenda for excavating castle, we need to think, what are the main drivers for securing power? Well, one is victory in sea battles. The galley ships were hugely important. And its victory in sea battles is critical, as is securing a resource base, your soldiers, your labourers, your craftspeople, the food supply. As is simply going and raiding and plundering others, whether it's on the same island or elsewhere. Building alliances and securing inheritance was critically important, as well as engaging in and controlling trade. So they're the key drivers, and the two key bits of material culture in this period to deliver those were the galley ships, the Bolins. It was a sea-going society that was critical not only for victory and sea battles, but also for the trade and the commerce. And then also the castles. Castles as symbols of power, as fortresses, as controlling the seaways, as harbouring, maintaining the fleet, and great halls for doing the entertaining that was so critical in the alliances. And throughout the Western Scotland, we of course got such a marvellous set of these so-called galley castles. And there's Dunyvaig, and you can see that Dunyvaig is the only one that lacks this 19th, 20th, 18th, 19th century development, which means we feasibly have greater access to some of this medieval archaeology. So that background just frames the sort of questions we're asking about it. So we can ask, through that sea gate, the only one of these castles, was it used for ships being dragged through there for winter storage and repair within that courtyard area? Was when precisely were, of course, all the walls constructed? These internal buildings, are they later insertions by the Campbells when they overtook the castle? Were they workshops for the ships? Were they storehouses for traded goods? And equally, you can ask, where was there a great hall? If there was a great hall, it's unlikely to have been on the tower. That's a too small area. So in this area, the environs of the castle, was there a great hall there? Were there artisans there? Was there merchant houses? Where's the chapel and burial ground? And was this area down here the main landing bay, or was it round by the sea gates? We can also ask, how was the landscape managed for the cattle, for arable, and for timber and the other resources? And how did the climate changes of the medieval period, notably the Little Ice Age, impact on productivity, and how did that engage with the political and social history of the castle? We can also ask, how did Dunyvaig relate to the other MacDonald strongholds on the island? Of course, Finlaggan, the administrative centre of the Lords of the Isles, but then also Lochgorn Castle. I don't think it's formerly a crannock because I don't think it's artificial, but anyway, it's an island. Lochgorn Castle in Lochgorn. So we can formalise all of those questions in a larger list that I'm not going through, but they're fairly evident. So let's get to the actual project itself. We've started an assessment in 2018 to basically explore the type of context sediments we might have to frame the larger excavation. Of the leadership team now, I'm just picking out Darko Maricevic there, who is actually the director of the excavation and the survey. And the team in 2018 was constituted mainly of students from University of Highlands and Islands, from my university, University of Reading, and a number of local volunteers. And it's a big event for the island, beginning an excavation, beginning a project. This is a castle that the elderly people in Ireland have been visiting since they were children, going for picnics and so forth. They all have photos of this castle for a long time period back. So it is a big event, and we had this huge turnout for breaking ground. And I think we need to mark events, beginning excavations, in this way by involving the community. And you can see the number of people who came down to do our deturfing for us. Hugely grateful for that. I'm just going to move on very quickly here to...
The words excitement and archaeology don't often go.
So this is Lord George Robertson, ex-Secretary General of NATO from local man of Islay.
Really a dramatic and an exciting moment in the history of Ireland, because we're standing here in circumstances where a very long time ago genuine history was made, and where Ireland is the centre of the world. Now some people still think it is, and have every good reason to think so. But the work that is going to be done over the next few weeks will hopefully reveal another world that took place in Islay as well. So Steve's to be congratulated for the work that has gone in here as well. The Agio and Lagabulin and the rest who made the historic Islay project financially viable need to be thanked as well. But the volunteers who are here, I think, are going to discover and uncover things that we didn't know before, maybe we should have known before, but which will be very revealing for all of us as well. So I'm delighted to be here. Dunyvaig, as I used to call it, Dunyvaig, it seems to have multiple pronunciations, but that's Islay for you. So the excitement starts here, and I'm now going to, with this Neolithic spear, which goes back into the prehistory of peat cutting on the island. Am I going to ceremonially tell people, you can watch my stick, watch my spade, as they say. Dick! Let's get started. It's another thing, when you look at
So what we did dig in the 2018, we began 3 evaluation trenches. One in the courtyard wall, you can see there, trench 1 by the sea gate, and one in the outside of the courtyard in what we call the environs area. Starting with that trench 3, we're mainly exploring what was exposed by geophysics and laser scan as this strange T-shaped building you can see there. And we began some initial work on that. I'll just very quickly let you hear Roddy Reagan here. Oh, let's go back.
Day 10. It's a virtual Friday, so it's kind of the last day of the week. We've got a day off tomorrow. So the guys, this is structure 1. Last video we did, I think I showed you that we had lots of burnt material, probably collapsed roofing material, coming down onto a floor. We've cleaned down to the floor now. We're waiting for a photograph. And what we have found in the corner here is actually an oven or a kiln. Not entirely sure what it is yet. So you can see the burning down here. It's been cut into the natural gravels, and this red burning here. And we've also got a bit of probably what is the fuel, which looks like it might be peat. The rest of the building, the way it's working at the moment, I think what they've done is they've levelled we're on a natural sort of gravel platform. I think it might be it's definitely geology as far as I can see. There might be a bit of occupation underneath the building itself. And then the building looks like it's directly built onto this gravel, and the gravel has been utilised as a flooring, which is perfectly adequate. And I've seen Highland houses before just with clay floors and dirt floors.
Right, we're going to cut them off there. So what we're doing there, we're exposing part of the floor. You can see where it's got the oven lining there and the walls. And this has produced a range of evidence for domestic craft activities, including metalworking, probably dated to the 17th century. Flint tools are coming up there, suggesting earlier prehistoric occupation in this little part of Dunyvaig Bay, and you can see part of a rotary quern. In the trenches 1 and 2 within the courtyard, trench 2 focused on the area of the sea gates, and you can see there just beginning. That's day 5. Further excavation there, and we're expecting to find simply lots of, I suppose, homogeneous sedimentary development. But in fact, what was found here is this a pointer? Yeah. So you're looking out through the sea gate here, and here at the bottom of this trench here, we think we'll find the first trace of the slipway here, possibly for dragging ships in. But here, this is interesting. This is actually a turf wall, so you can see all the turfs here. So this is evidence that this sea gate was actually blocked by a turf wall at some date. Elsewhere in this trench, we have remains of the building coming through here, with botanical remains here, which have been identified as, you can see the grass matting here, which has been identified as most likely thatch coming off one of the roofs. So just recall that turf wall there. And then going to trench 2, around by the courtyard wall. If I've got time, just one quick video. Yeah, just do one quick video here, because I think this is, oops. Get these going.
Day 12, trench 1, update.
This is Amanda Clark, who's running the field school. She's from the University of Reading.
Behind me here, we have the wonderful side of our excavation director, who is actually within this stone feature, described variously as a well, a water cistern, or even a latrine. Today is the day that Darko is actually getting into it to clear out some of the modern rubbish that has accumulated there. And you can see in the wheelbarrow some of the items that have been recovered. A lot of metalwork, guttering by the looks of it, hinges, lots of nails. The idea is that we'll get to a point where it's possible to actually put a core down it so we can get some sense of the depth of this feature. I think one of the things that we do now know about it is that certainly the latest phases of this are certainly built up and probably contemporary with the buildings that are being excavated now, because all the way around it we've got this turf wall. So the upper levels have got this sort of limestone walling on the feature, and then the upper levels are of turf, which is banked up against the outer courtyard wall, which is also of turf at this stage. So within our trench here, what we're working on now is firstly defining these retaining walls. So there's an L-shaped feature here with these quite substantial stones, within which there are smaller stones and turfing, retaining, banked up against the courtyard wall, and also retaining the latest stages of this feature. Excitingly, and building up against these turf walls is a midden, which Kerry is busy excavating. There's quite a depth of material. We've no idea how deep it is, but it's certainly mounded up, full of charcoal, burnt clay, and...
Right, I'm going to move on to cut her off there. As the exhibit moved on, as you can see, Amanda was talking about the area here. On the other side of the wall there, we have building B, which is with a clay floor here exposed. And we're finding that these internal buildings are very substantially built. We're still not entirely clear whether they're later insertions or whether they're integral with this main wall here. Our trench across the wall here has identified intramural passage here, similar to this castle on Lismore, we feel, and here's the turf wall. Now, the turf fortifications are found all the way along the wall there and over this area of well. This is the well that you saw darker, clearing all the modern rubbish out. And the following day, when Amanda was talking, we realised that we have in fact a capped drain coming through this area. We think that these buildings may have looked something like this. And it was on the floor here that we found a key find, which is this matrix, this seal matrix. It was on the clay floor, and this is seal matrix of Sir John Campbell. It's made of lead with a fair amount of silver in, and it was located on the floor. And you can see here the inscription, Jonas Campbell of Caldor, and with the typical Caldor arms on here, with the stag's head, with the five-pointed star in the middle there, a Berlin boat there. On the back, it's got a date, 1593. And we know that in 1592, his father was assassinated, or died at least. So this is when he came to the earldom. And we've just had it conserved, so it's a rather fine and very important piece. Couldn't have a better find on the excavation, because that's allowed us to suggest what these turf walls are doing. So this seal, 1593, was found on the floor here. Now we know that Sir John Campbell took control of the island in 1615. So what we suspect, and then we also know that the MacDonalds had various rebellions. What we expect is the collapse from the walls here was destroyed by the 1614 artillery bombardment. Now, Kiltack retook the castle in about 1646, and he was sieged within it for a year. So what we are speculating now is that these turf walls were what Kiltack built as his defences. Because by this time, with the use of artillery, stone walls are of no use at all, because they just collapse if they're hit by an artillery thing. They're good if people are running against them with muskets and things. So we suspect that the turf wall built here and the turf wall blocking the seat gate were actually Kiltack's wall defences, rebuilding the courtyard, blocking the sea gate prior to his capture and his execution in 1647. So we think finding the seal here has allowed us to interpret that, link those finds to the history. Now, very quickly, moving on, just finishing, we're undertaking a geophysics survey. We'll be ongoing of this. We think here's the castle here, here's our T-shaped structure. We think we may have identified an old roadway coming through here. We've got a large structure at the back here, potentially the chapel and burial ground. Another set of buildings here, all of which we'll be exploring in future seasons. Mark Thacker from University of Stirling is working on the standing remains, looking at the mortars. He thinks he can identify an earlier footprint, which he thinks may be a 14th century wall, with the same footprint as the 16th century walls above it. Obviously, we're doing survey, sediment coring locations in the hinterland. Regarding the community, we had, just in the 3 weeks of excavation, 401 visitors coming from 20 different countries. It's got an international profile on Islay. And we entertained more than 118 school children from the Islay schools who came down and engaged in excavation and learnt what it's like to be an archaeologist. And then we've also done a programme of work trying to find ways to engage other members of the community with the excavation. We had the Dunyvaig bake-off, cakes in the on the theme of the castle, and you can see here we've got all sorts of ones. I think this one with somebody come up in a well here, and a spoiled heat cake. It's fairly easy to make, I think. But anyway, and then an artist day. We heard earlier about Fingal's Cave being an inspiration to artists. I think we need to continue that. We need to continue with archaeological monuments and natural sites, inspiring artists, musicians, and so forth. We began that with our artist day with a local artist last year. And also a photography day with Ben Shakespeare. And all this has generated a huge amount of interest on the island, especially the discovery of the seal. That will temporarily at least be on display on Islay Museum. Going forward in this summer, we're going to do some small-scale expansions on these trenches, provisionally. We're still waiting for just a schedule and consent permission on those, and continue to excavate, especially the slipway in this area. But we want to do a large open-air excavation across that T-shaped building. We think that's really interesting in trying to work out what's happening in these castle courtyards, courtyards, and we'll explore some of these anomalies. Looking forward, we hope that our large programme of excavation will excavate substantial areas within the castle courtyard and outside, and turn this into more of a accessible, informative asset for the island to conserve it. So finally, IALA Heritage, a charity that will be welcoming everybody to the excavation. It's running between the 14th of August and the 4th of September. Do come to IALA, visit, join in for a day. IALA Heritage also runs an archaeology week every year. We're going to be doing events at the IALA show, archaeology tours of different parts of the island, some training on erosion sites at Ardnave, presentation of John Campbell's seal to the museum, and then the dig begins on the 14th. And finally, I'd like to thank the Society of Antiquaries again, and thank the IALA Heritage University of Reading for providing the funding for the excavation, and especially thank my two colleagues, Darko for directing the excavation and Amanda Clark for directing the field scope. Thank you very much.